All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today for this webinar about community gardens. Um, Before we get started, I'll just let you all know if you have any questions during the presentation, if you could type them into the chat, we will make note of those so that when question time comes at the end, we can go through those quickly. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Gene. This is Gene Cross with the Community Connections Garden at Wake Forest Baptist Church. He's going to talk to you a little bit about their community garden operation, what they do, and hopefully this will be good information for you. All right, Gene.
All right. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Everybody can hear. All right, very good. My name is Gene Cross, and I've been a volunteer with the Community Connections Garden since its beginnings. The garden actually grew out of a dream and vision of Dr. Bill Slater, who is the former pastor, now retired, from Wake Forest Baptist, as well as a Sunday school class and some individuals who recognized the need in our community. At the same time, 12 years ago, I was retired from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. I worked directly with NC Department of Ag in the plant industry division, and I oversaw seed, plant products, and fertilizer. It was a regulatory arm of the Department of Ag, and I had worked there for 32 years. And at the time, it was fall of 2012, we were expecting our first granddaughter. And so my interests were maybe looking at something to do to volunteer in the community, but my primary focus was my granddaughter being born. She was born 5 days after I retired. But I got a call from the pastor, Dr. Bill Slater. He said that he wanted to visit with me for a few minutes. And so I went to his office and we chatted for a little while, and he indicated that he was interested in seeing our church sponsor a community garden. And so I immediately looked at all those reasons not to start a community garden. In fact, I told him, I said, let me go back and put some figures there, and thinking that I would discourage him when I brought the figures back. Well, I bought a nice paper back to Bill Slater, and Bill looked at it, and over his readers, he said, when do we get started? And so we started the garden in earnest that fall. We only grew one crop, and that was collards. And you'll see in just a few minutes what we actually grew in terms of production. So Micah, can you actually flip these slides for me? There we go. So our mission at the outset was very deliberate. Our mission was to connect people to our neighbors in the community, the land, and God by using sustainable agriculture to provide fresh local food for the hungry in our community. And there are many, many individuals that fit into that category. Micah, if you flip it one more time. So at the outset, why for us consider a community garden? Well, our founders wanted to demonstrate to our volunteers as well as others in the community how to successfully grow nutritious vegetables. And that all stemmed from the fact that we do at least 40% of Americans are obese and suffer and struggle with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. And just in preparation for this, I looked back. This is an amazing figure to me. 60% of our calories in the American diet now maybe are tied to ultra-processed foods. And so that was alarming to us overall. And the idea that many in our community, rather than look at nutritious vegetables, opted to go to the convenience store and buy a pack of potato chips or buy something that was not very healthy at all. That, coupled with the fact that ultra-processed foods, as all of you know, present a high risk of disease and chronic diseases and others. All that aside, a major reason for building the garden and having the garden was creating a space for sharing fellowship and developing relationship with others in our community. And that was a strong, strong desire for us overall, and the desire of our pastor. So flip it for me, Michael. So our first discussions happened in fall of 2012. we looked at the need for a structure for what our community garden might look like. And in our particular case, we landed on a model that probably is different than some of the other community gardens. Our garden would be one in which everybody worked for the common good of the whole garden. So many of the gardens, as you're probably aware, individuals quote rent a space in the garden, and that family or individual grow crops, and they donate a portion of their crops to the garden overall, and that might get donated to an end result. We chose to do a model in which everybody worked for the common good, so there were no assigned areas to the garden. Our garden was actually one in which we grew in ground. There are very few raised beds. We have now developed a couple of raised beds for individuals that might not be able to work and till in the garden, but 99% of our garden is actually grown in ground. And we were very lucky because the church gave us a portion of land that's located between the church office and the church itself, which is in downtown Wake Forest, right in the middle of downtown Wake Forest. So we were very lucky there in the fact that this is a very productive area. It'd been a pasture in many, many years past. And so horses had been there over many, many years. And so we had a very fertile area, very prime soil overall. So the major goal of the garden would be to connect people in the community. We wanted to reach out to get individuals that were not members of our church, even though we do have some participants that are from Wake Forest Baptist Church. A primary goal would be to get individuals who are not members of our church, maybe members of other churches or members of the community who might have an interest in knowing and understanding how they might grow nutritious crops. And so in the fall of 2013, our volunteers broke ground on this new garden, and the first harvest were made in the fall of that year. I think we harvested, we'll see in a second, but I think in the neighborhood of 300 pounds of collards. One of the primary things that we knew we had to do is that we knew we had to fence that area in. So as you can see in the picture here, individuals helped us actually get a fence around that small area that we were going to be growing in. Our garden is about now 3/4 of an acre in size. That first part of when we first established the garden, it was much smaller. So our garden council, and you'll see in a few minutes how that garden council functions. After that fall of 2013, our group met and we started to talk about what we might do next, how we might proceed. And the decision was made by the garden council that we were going to venture out and we were going to double the size of the garden. So starting in 2014, we doubled the size of the garden overall. Right, Mike, if you'd flip it for me. And so this shows a schematic of our garden. The area at the bottom half of the screen that's referred to as the Old Testament is actually our initial garden area that we started with in 2013. And you can see the layout of the beds there. With our vision expanding in 2014, we expanded the garden to that upper area there you see in the picture and we dubbed that or named that the New Testament overall. And we have a number of beds. These are all in-ground beds, some for perennial vegetable crops and others that are cycled in and out. We have added some areas along the way. We've added some planting areas for cut flowers down at the bottom of the photograph. That whole area across the bottom and across the right side there up to the or the New Testament is actually planted. Part of it is planted in flowers that are available to the community for individuals to come and cut. We added shortly after we started the garden, over to the right, that gray box is a shelter that we have, not shelter, a shed that actually holds all the tools that we need for the garden overall. And then where you see the New Testament designation there, the letters, we've actually added some overwintering beds that are used to start early season crops. And we have some areas that are available above ground for individuals who are not able to bend down and work. They can actually work in those areas there. Over to the right is our apiary, which has been up and down overall. We currently got bees started back there again this year. So Mike, if you would flip it overall for me. So just to recap, the garden goals were to connect people in the community. Primary reason we started the garden. Everyone is welcome at the garden, just not members of the church. As an aside, we've really cherished those individuals who come from outside our church, because we've become great friends with many individuals that volunteer their time overall. More than 80%, I would say maybe closer now to 90% of the harvest that we have in the garden, in the Community Connections garden, is donated or contributed to local community needs. As I mentioned earlier, one of the facets of our work was that all volunteers work together to accomplish all the garden tasks. So if you would flip it, Micah. So I mentioned a little bit earlier the Garden Council, and the work of the garden is overseen by a garden council that has members not only from Wake Forest Baptist Church, but also has members from outside our church as well. And all of the work that we do, all of the projects we take are screened and overseen by this garden council. There are approximately 8 members on the garden council, and we meet as needed, not so much during the season, but during the off season to plan the work that goes out. We have 3 different designations in the garden of individuals, sort of a grouping of individuals. First, the garden volunteers, which for us are the most important overall. Then we have a master garden, an individual that serves as the sort of lead overall, and serves as the leader for the garden council. And then we have garden coordinators, individuals who take tasks each week, whether it be Wednesday or Friday, and I'll talk about that, Wednesday or Saturday. I'll talk about those in a few minutes, but they act as the go-to task individuals on the work days. You might ask, well, how do we fund this project overall? Wake Forest Baptist Church provides us an annual budget this year of $3,200 for purchases that we might need for the garden overall to assist with garden expenses. And then we do ask individual members to make a contribution of $15 per year, and the individual members contribute $15 at a minimum of 10 hours of volunteer work time during the year. And as an aside there, nobody keeps up with that. Individuals, it's the buddy system there where individuals know and understand that that's what they need to do overall. All right. So again, I mentioned the $15 yearly membership, and that says to individuals, when you pay that $15, you're able to, if you desire to, you can take any of the produce that we produce there. You can take a portion of that produce as you need it. And as I note here, this fee can be waived for issues of hardship overall, and volunteers commit to working a minimum of 10 hours a year. And most of our volunteers, in fact, all of our volunteers, clearly exceed that 10 hours a year. So our vegetables are shared directly in the community that we live in. About a half a mile from the Community Connections Garden is another nonprofit that is called Tri-Area Ministries. And this nonprofit provides food and other items to local individuals, and they minister to a number of individuals in our community. It's a drive up. At this particular time, it's a drive up type operation, and they're open on Mondays and Tuesdays and a couple of Saturdays during the month. We carry produce to Tri-Area Ministries at least 2 times per week, every week. Then we also contribute to a mobile market, which is administered through the Interfaith Food Shuttle at Wake Forest Baptist. The Wake Forest Baptist Church sponsors a monthly market on the 3rd Tuesday of each month, and we try to time some of the production of our produce so that we can actually get that produce there on the 3rd Tuesday. They meet at 3:30. A truck comes and unloads produce and dry goods, canned goods, etc. And it's all sorted, and that individuals have a drive-through there in the church parking lot. The third area that we actually deliver our produce to is a soup kitchen called Blessing Incorporated in Bunn, a little community outside of Lewisburg. And this particular nonprofit serves a healthy meal every Thursday in that little town. This has become a great source for us, because if we have an overage of things like tomatoes or a highly perishable crop, this group will take those, and they actually have capacity to freeze those vegetables. So they'll freeze things like tomatoes, or they'll can string beans, or whatever the case might be. And it serves as a place for us to quickly get some vegetables that we might have that might otherwise perish. And then fourthly, our volunteers are able to take a portion of the produce that's produced there and take it home for their use as well. So a little bit about the background of what we have in terms of harvest and volunteer information. As you can see, in 2013, that first harvest was strictly collards. That was 304 pounds of collards that we produced. And you can see the actual number of pounds produced in the garden have somewhat risen. There have been some years in which we've had some catastrophes and we haven't produced as much. But I'm really proud to say in 2023, we had the largest production that we've had at all. And we're on course this year to even top that. We hope that we're able to top that number. And again, most of that produce goes to the local community. And then I tabulated over 8,200 volunteer hours since we began our garden in 2013 overall. So a very productive garden, and a very highly visible one to our volunteers there overall. So I just wanted to sort of end here with a couple of what I consider to be challenges for our garden over the years and what we've encountered. As many gardens might experience, for us, we do not have a well on site. And so what we've been able to do at minimum is we actually have a meter, a water meter. We get our irrigation water from the city of Raleigh through the town of Wake Forest there. So we have a meter. We don't get charged for sewer, but we have strictly water coming from there because we have not drilled a well at this site yet. We started to, after the first couple of years of hand watering, we actually migrated over to using irrigation in the garden, and we have a piping that goes into each of those beds, and it's a slow drip irrigation overall. And we've used that up through last year. We started in 2024, we're starting to look at changing how we do the irrigation there, because we didn't bury those irrigation lines. We have a leader that comes through each of those areas of the garden, and then pipes come off, irrigation comes off of those for that slow drip irrigation. Each time we sequence a crop in the garden overall, we got to pull those out. We don't bury them. We got to pull those out. And what we found is they become years, and we've had to replace them, and they get destroyed, and we have leaks in the garden. So in 2024, we're exploring, with the exception of our tomato crop, we're exploring a different type of irrigation system, and we'll see how that actually pans out. We're doing a couple of different things there, but we're still operating with City of Raleigh water. And I said initially our irrigation was a problem, but up through last year, we've been able to successfully keep the garden watered. It's on a timer, so areas of the garden are watered at different times. I didn't go into earlier our pest control. We are not an organic garden overall. We actually term ourselves as being a sustainable garden. What that means to me and the other volunteers to the garden itself is we continually do assessments there at the garden to look at weed problems, to look at insect problems, and we don't automatically go out and do any treatment overall unless it's absolutely necessary, in which we've had to do some treatments overall. And for weeds, we definitely had to do some treatments. We have a heavy weed population in this area due to the pasture that was there before. So we have things like a lot of chickweed. We have a lot of pigweed that is sort of indicative of horses overall and being there. So we don't classify classify ourselves as organic, but we are a sustainable garden overall. One of the major things that we had difficulties with is actually keeping the volunteer levels high. We tend to have we'll have a kickoff in February or March, and then we have a large number of volunteers, maybe 20, 30 volunteers that come to that meeting. And then early season, early spring, we have a large number of volunteers. We might have 15 to 20 volunteers that come out to the garden. As the summer temperatures come along and people have other things that they want to do, vacation or whatever, the numbers dwindle during the summer. And we have not only have the garden open every Saturday from 9 to 12, we have the garden when production starts and wraps up. We actually have the garden open on Wednesdays for another second harvest time. But the bulk of our work for the garden is done on Saturday with just a supplemental harvest on Wednesdays overall. And we harvest on both Saturdays and on Wednesdays overall. One of the things that we've done this year is we've actually tailored the crops that we're growing overall to the community. And over the years, in working with Tri-Area Ministry, we come to know and understand crops that really are desirable for individual clients, and we've narrowed that down. This garden has grown over 38 different crops during the course of a year, and we've been able to pull that down somewhat and function and center on certain crops that we feel might be more important and more useful to individuals. So we primarily focus on early season greens. We'll do kale and carrots and lettuces, arugula, broccoli, things like that in the early season, cabbage. And then we'll flip the garden over and we'll be planting potatoes. We grow a large number of potatoes. This year in the garden, we planted 300 pounds of seed potatoes alone. So many of our beds are devoted at this time of the season to spring potatoes. And we're growing 4 different varieties there in the garden right now. And then once the potatoes are harvested, potatoes and onions are harvested, we'll move over to zucchini, squash, okra, and then maybe a few beans. Beans aren't as useful to us because they're a very labor-intensive crop, and it's more desirable for us, at least the clients have told us, getting things like squash and zucchini are easy to grow, and they're readily available, fast turnaround in the crop. And we'll turn some of these beds over 2 to 3 times or more per year. So we're growing multiple crops in succession. We have a large number of tomatoes. This year, primarily our tomato crop are all heirloom tomatoes. We have grown some improved varieties, but primarily this year, our crops are all heirloom. Our tomatoes are all heirloom. I think that was all, and I think I'll stop right there because I hope to have some time for questions overall.
Yes, we did have one question in the chat already from Lynn Hebel. She asked, how deep in the ground did you dig in preparation for the garden, and were there trees nearby?
Yeah, we did not have to dig. This was actually a pasture area. And I think over the course of the season, you can see trees there in the background. This picture on the left was taken this spring, about a month ago, I think, 3 weeks ago. There are trees around the perimeter of the garden. We've had to actually take down at least 2 that were problematic for us. One fell in the garden over to the left that you can't see there, but we actually came into the garden initially and did a deep plow in that garden. We had a rotavator to come in. One of the members of our church at Wake Forest Baptist is a tractor supply or a dealer, equipment dealer, and he brought in a rotavator into that garden. These beds are roughly 5 to 6 foot in width by 20 feet in length, 25 feet in some cases. We actually rotavated each of those beds down to a depth of about 8 to 10 inches.
Lynn also asked, how high is your fencing?
The fencing itself, that first round is approximately 6 feet tall. Where you see the board go across there, the left photograph, it's approximately 6 feet tall. And then we added some wire, 2 strands of wire on top of that. So we have not had any problem with deer in the garden. What we have experienced some difficulty still with rabbits and with groundhogs. So we come back into the garden itself and added an upright fencing, a chicken wire fencing around the perimeter of the garden. And then we added a piece of fencing that's laid on the ground, on the top of the ground, all the way around the garden to maybe preclude having groundhogs come in. But they still can dig underneath that over time. They find a way in. We had to do some fence bending fence bending on Saturday this week because we saw where a groundhog had actually gotten in 2 places. Still have problems with rabbits. It's almost impossible to keep rabbits out of an area like that, even though we have a very fine mesh fence that goes up vertically there. It's almost impossible for us to keep the rabbits out.
Lynn followed up with, are those 4x4 centers on top? And what gauge is the wire?
I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't quite understand.
She asked, are those 4x4 centers on top? And what gauge is the wire?
I don't know what gauge the wire is, but they are 4x4 center post. It is a utility wire that's, as I say, is 2 single strands up there. But I don't know the gauge of the one. I was going to mention too, I failed to mention, we really have many different partners that we've worked with overall. One that is my former employer, NC Department of Ag. As I mentioned at the outset, I actually oversaw a division that regulated seed, fertilizer, and plant products. So I was able to talk with the folks that I previously worked for, and one of the areas that I oversaw was seed testing. As a matter of fact, when I started my career with NC Department of Ag, I actually started as an analyst in the seed section of NC Department of Ag. And all of the seed that are available, that are sold in North Carolina, have to be tested. Crop seed have different parameters that they have to meet overall to be sold, germination and as well as purity. But vegetable seed have to have a label as well. And you've all seen the labels and you've watched your labels there overall. And so seed are sent in voluntarily by individuals who want to actually sell seed in North Carolina, as well as some official samples are taken by inspectors who go out and take a look. But those service samples that are sent to Department of Ag are just tested for germination. They look, vegetable plant seed are just tested for germination. So after the germination tests are complete, everything's finished with the testing and the reports are sent out. Those seed are kept for several months overall, and then they were being discarded in a landfill and buried. What I actually have turned that around to be is those seed now, we're able to bring those to the garden and we're utilizing those. So we buy very few seed overall at the garden. Most of everything that you see there is actually either grown directly from seed that we've obtained from NC Department of Ag. The seed potatoes we do buy. The tomatoes I all grow from seed that were tested at NC Department of Ag. I grew all the peppers that we use this year from seed. And of course, the onion sets, we actually purchased onion sets overall. The seed potatoes were purchased, but a large number of the seed, all the zucchini, all the squash, all the early season vegetables like mustard and turnip and others are the seed are obtained free and donated by NC Department of Ag. So a great partner for us. and those seed don't go to the landfill now, which I think is a real important thing. They're utilized for something that's positive.
Does anybody else have any questions for Gene?
And I would finally say, I'm open to any questions that folks might want to present, or at a later time, if you think of something, don't hesitate to let me know. Our next venture, we recently received some funds from the from the town of Wake Forest, as well as the Food Network, the Northeast Food Network. We're going to be building a pavilion there at the garden that will allow us to be able to better process our vegetables. When vegetables come out of the garden itself, we're able to actually, many of those have to be washed, some don't. They automatically get packaged and sent directly to the sources or the end locations that I mentioned. But some of the things that we have to be washed and prepared. They have to be bundled and made available. We do bundle a number of the vegetables overall, things like spring onions and greens and herbs that are produced in the garden overall. So those, we needed a place to actually compete at. And so Town of Wake Forest and that Northern Area Food Network have donated some money that will allow us to construct a pavilion that we can actually not only process and get the foods ready to go, but we can also offer some educational opportunities there as well. So it'll be built adjacent to the garden, and our hope is to have that done within 6 to 9 months.
All right, well, not a question.
Thank you so much, Gene. We really appreciate it.
Sure. No problem. Again, if you have questions offline, don't hesitate to get up with me, and I'll be glad to try to answer those. And if we can help any other gardens, community gardens, their startup, and we learn from others. There's no doubt. We really do.
Gene, I don't know if you saw, but Emma in the chat wanted to shout you out for hosting the 4-H Farm to Fork camp a few years ago.
Yeah, we did. That was a great venture. And that's an evidence we took. I took our granddaughters to that, one of the meetings and got involved there. That was a great venture.
All right, well, if there are no more questions for Gene, I will go ahead and let everybody know we will have 3 more of these webinars. Thank you so much, Gene, for presenting for this one. You did a wonderful job. We really appreciate you doing this for us. We'll have
Absolutely.
3 more webinars. The next one will be next Tuesday on the 11th at noon at the same time, and the topic will be youth hunger. So please come out for that one.